So let's talk about melatonin, since that's kind of the biggie that a lot of people like to know about. So number one, melatonin is by prescription only almost everywhere other than the United States, right? So in England, in Australia, in Europe, you can't just walk into the drugstore and buy melatonin. And there's a reason. A lot of people don't realize it, but melatonin is a hormone. There's a reason you can't go to the CVS and get testosterone and estrogen, right? Because hormones affect the entire system. They affect almost 300 different things in your body. So what you don't want to do is have somebody just willy-nilly grabbing a hormone and starting to pop it without somebody understanding what's going on with them. More importantly, melatonin in particular, and the point I wanted to make earlier about depression, melatonin interacts with all SSRI medication. An SSRI is a serotonin-specific reuptake inhibitor, an antidepressant. So things like Prozac, Zoloft, Celexa, all of those are medications that will be affected by melatonin ingestion, and nobody knows that it is. In addition, melatonin affects birth control. Yes, you heard it here. Birth control. It affects blood pressure medication and it affects diabetes medication. So one of the problems is that people go into the local drugstore and they're like, I'm going to grab some melatonin and I'm going to make my sleep better because I'm sleeping poorly. So first of all, that's not what melatonin does. Melatonin is a sleep regulator, not a sleep initiator. Melatonin doesn't affect sleep drive. Melatonin affects sleep rhythm. So remember in the beginning of our conversation, we're talking about the two systems. Melatonin only affects your brain telling it when it's time to go to bed. It does not make you sleepy. That's adenosine. We already talked about adenosine and caffeine and how similar their molecular structures are. So when you look at something like melatonin, you need to really be thoughtful about using it. Number two, melatonin is not to be used in children, okay? So a lot of people are like, Michael, I've got pediatricians all over the country telling me to give my children melatonin. I'm gonna say it right here in front of everybody. That is the dumbest idea I have heard in a long time, because you just taught your child that they need a pill to sleep. Normally, no child needs pills to sleep. And by the way, most children make almost 4 times the amount of melatonin that their brain even needs. So giving them extra melatonin doesn't do you any good. There is, however, one group of children where melatonin does work well, and that's in kids on the autism spectrum. We don't know exactly why, but or at least I don't, but there is data to suggest that at 5, 6, 7 milligrams, that can be very helpful for them. Dosage also is a problem. Like if you go to the drugstore, you almost can't find it in the appropriate dose. The appropriate dose is anywhere from about 0.5 milligram to 1.5 milligrams. Maybe top out at 3, but that's about as high as you want to go. But when you go to CVS, you find gummies in 10 and 20 milligrams. And people tell me all the time, I can't take melatonin, it gives me crazy dreams. Number one side effect of overdosing on melatonin is crazy dreams.
On this point of going to a supermarket and picking some melatonin off the shelf, FDA approval and the lack of FDA approval in melatonin means that there's less clarity on what's actually in there, right?
That's exactly right.
I was reading about a study in 2024 where they looked at different melatonins that were found on the shelf.
And they found very different things inside the bottle.
Very, very different things. They looked at an analysis of melatonin gummies marketed for children and found that the actual amount of melatonin ranged from 0% to 667% of what was listed on the label.
Yep, see it all the time.
And in the same study, some melatonin gummies contained absolutely no melatonin, while others contained hazardous contaminants like CBD that were not disclosed on the label.
Yep.
Because melatonin is sold as a supplement in the US and not a drug, the FDA does not test it for safety or accuracy before it hits the shelf.
You are 100% correct. And that's a huge problem. Just think about that for a second. I mean, the market for melatonin is tremendous. It's huge in the supplement world, yet there's no regulation whatsoever. Nobody knows about these interaction effects, which are big, big, big. And by the way, most people are using it wrong. There's really only 3, maybe 4 different instances when melatonin would be useful. I would use melatonin for jet lag, and we should talk about jet lag. I would use melatonin for shift workers, right? So for people who work, night shift, who have to sleep during the daytime, they would be excellent people to use melatonin. People with a melatonin deficiency, A lot of people don't think about that, but right around age 50 is when, if you're going to have a melatonin deficiency, we start to see that happening for people. Is it their ability to produce melatonin begins to decline? So I think those three situations absolutely would be on board for melatonin. Believe it or not, there's some data to show that in ADD and ADHD, there's some use for melatonin, and then also for a very specific sleeping disorder called REM behavior disorder.
We're going melatonin crazy as a society, aren't we?
Absolutely. We don't need it. It's completely unnecessary.
I was looking at the data. 1999, 0.4% of Americans said they used melatonin. Today, it's almost 30%. So about 70 million Americans.
Up.
That's crazy.
Dude, that is problematic. And again, they have no idea what it's doing to them, right? And they're giving it to their kids. Like, I can't think of anything worse for a young female developing body than to add a contraceptive when it's not necessary. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me.
The rise in children overdosing on sleep gummies is the fastest growing trend in poison control data.
Yeah, I think it's like almost 600% increase or something crazy like that for kids who have who've overdosed on melatonin. Like there was a study that came out maybe a year and a half ago, showed like almost 600% of increase in overdosages for kids. Like, that's pretty messed up when you start to think about it. And here's the thing, kids know how to sleep, right? You just got to stop. You just got to let them sleep, right? You got to give them some parameters. Here's when you go to bed. Here's when you wake up. Don't get out of bed. Don't come in and ask for 12 glasses of water. All the stuff that goes on there. I mean, this isn't hard.
So when and how? So I used melatonin once in my life.
Okay.
And I've got to be honest, it fucking worked.
Yeah. Oh, if you use it right, it works, bro.
And it was actually about a week ago because I'd been struggling with lots of jet lag. I'd flown from the UK to LA to UK to LA to Cape Town to the Middle East to wherever. And I was getting to bed every night at like 4 or 5 a.m. and still waking up at, having to wake up at about 10. So I thought, I need to correct this.
Yes,
it's been going for 2 weeks and I need to correct this.
Absolutely.
So I thought, fuck it, I'm going to cave. I took the melatonin and corrected it.
Yes, it does. So let's talk about jet lag. So it's a bit of a story, but I got involved with a company that has got an app, which is very interesting, okay? I don't have any, I'm not invested in the company, just to be clear, but it's one of my close friends who developed this. So I'm kind of a space nerd.
It's not Time Shifter.
It is Time Shifter.
Oh, really?
It is.
I would
Time
also
Shifter.
like an affiliation with Time Shifter. Because
No problem.
I used them, yeah.
Yeah, I will get you that. So here's what's fascinating is the way the whole Time Shifter started was, so aren't you kind of a space guy? Like, aren't you
I'm an investor in SpaceX and
okay,
space,
so I'm a space nerd myself, right? So the ISS is moving around at 17,500 miles an hour around the Earth. It's cooking.
ISS meaning the International Space Station.
Yeah, it's whipping around, right? Can you imagine how many sunrises and sunsets they get in a given day?
No, how many?
Every 2 hours. So they basically get 12.
Wow.
Think about how messed up their circadian rhythms would be from seeing the sun rise and seeing it go and seeing it gets really messed up, right? And by the way, you don't want to make big mistakes in the space station. Like, you don't leave the airlock open, or shit like that. Like, that's when things get really, really bad. So they called down to NASA and they were like, hey, we got a problem up here. Everybody wants to use the lab at the same time. Like, people are seeing the sun. Like, what's going on? So they called a buddy of mine named Stephen Lockley over at Harvard. Stephen is arguably one of the best circadian researchers in the world. Super smart dude. And he was like, well, let's send up a lighting kit and let's create shifts on the space station. Right? So that's exactly what they did. So they set up a lighting kit. I think it was on the Columbia shuttle before it got decommissioned. And they set up lighting and then they set up timing for lighting. And so there was a morning shift, a mid shift, and a night shift for the astronauts. Once they got the algorithm working, they brought it down terrestrially and they put it into the Mercedes-Benz Formula One race car team. So they gave it to Lewis Hamilton, right? Because when you think about it, think about what he has to do, right? He's on or off the podium on hundredths of a second, right? And he's in a different country every 3 weeks, right? So this guy's got jet lag like you wouldn't believe. And so once we were able to get it going there, then we created the Time Shifter app. And so it's an app, you can get it on your phone. And what you do is you put in your flight number and it automatically pulls up the flight and knows where you are. This is why I think that jet lag is a math problem. Let me explain. We learned about 20 years ago that when you take a certain frequency and intensity of light and you shine it in somebody's eyes, you can move their circadian rhythm by about 8 hours if you want to.
Their circadian rhythm again being?
Being that internal biological clock, the times when your body wants to go to bed and wants to wake up. We can actually move that by about 8 hours with about 10,000 lux, which is the brightness level of a blue light, particular frequency of light, okay? So when you hit that, if you start in LA and you're going to Manchester, right? And there's a big time difference, and you know what time it is in LA and you know what time it is in Manchester, it's a math problem of when do you get the light. So that's what time shifter is it determines when do you need that light. And then on the times when you don't need light, it has you use caffeine, right? Or to keep you awake, or if it's time to sleep, then you use a little bit of melatonin. That's when melatonin becomes so valuable.
It also tells you when to eat.
It does. It tells you all of these different things. And it's kind of nice because it kind of shows up on your phone. It's like, hey, do this then, do this then. And it works really, really well. But yeah, time shifter is one of my favorites. I've been using it literally for 15 years.
Wow.
And it solves jet lag, bro. Like, we're going to fix that for you. No question.
How often should someone be having melatonin? Is there like too often? Because some people literally have it every day.
Yeah, I would argue it's a bad idea. So if you have a melatonin deficiency, sure, have it every day. But or if you're a shift worker, probably. But I use it only for jet lag myself. Otherwise, I'm not using it on the regular.
And what's the risk there of having it every day? Is it?
It's a good question. So when you start to look at melatonin overdose and you start to look at melatonin on board for long periods of time, there's been some conflict in the research. There's a group of people that say if you stay on melatonin for extended periods of time, your body stops producing it. There's another group of people that have looked at research and have said, actually, that's not the case. So right now, we have studies that lead out to about a year or so on melatonin. And when you stop their melatonin production after they've been taking it for a year, their body seems to start back up, no problem. It's different than testosterone, right? So with testosterone, we know that when men start taking testosterone, their body actually stops producing it. With melatonin, that does not appear to be the case, but we don't have studies that go out past, that year long. And so if somebody's been taking melatonin every day for 5-10 years, you kind of start to wonder what's going to happen. Also, don't forget that melatonin is different than the melatonin that's actually produced in your head.
I think it was Andrew Huberman, who I was speaking to a couple of weeks ago, that was saying about not giving kids an overdose of melatonin. And I think afterwards I was doing some research on it, and I read something that said it has an impact on puberty potentially.
So in high dosages, melatonin is a contraceptive.
So that would pause puberty?
Exactly. Or change it.
Okay.
And ways we may or may not know. So I agree with Andrew on that point that, again, melatonin is not something that kids need unless you've got kids on the spectrum, which is, again, where I find it to be helpful. And I've treated kids with that before. But generally speaking, I don't put melatonin on anybody under the age of 18.
Am I more likely to have nightmares if I'm having lots of melatonin?
If you're overdosing, you are.
Why?
So the number one side effect of a high dose of melatonin is super vivid dreams and then eventually nightmares.
Why?
I'm not really sure. If I was garnering a guess, then what I would say is that part of the reason why that you have crazy vivid dreams from melatonin is because it probably does put you into REM sleep a little bit quicker than you normally would and might keep you there a little bit longer. I don't have any data to support that, so I want to be clear. This is more of a hypothesis on my end, but that might make intuitive sense to me.